Everyone, we're going to begin our presentation. I'd like to welcome you all to the ISO 9001-2015 Critical Points of Review during the Transition Audit Process webinar. My name is Joseph Krolikowski, and I am the Technical Director of Perry Johnson Registrars. Couple of notes for everybody. We are all on mute. All participants are on mute, but we absolutely want your questions. So please use the question portion of the dashboard, and we will address your questions at the conclusion of our presentation. Our topics for today are as follows. We will be discussing the handling of the transition, what the approach will be. We'll discuss briefly the projected amount of additional audit time. We will review in depth what the new audit content is, and we're also going to try to paint a picture for you in terms of what the expectations will be and how the new items will be approached. We've got some summary statements on how the audit is going to feel different in going from 9001-2008 to 9001-2015. We've also got some key ideas on how the audit's going to be very much similar. Some concluding remarks, and then we will absolutely take your questions. Let's begin with a discussion on how the transition will be handled. Now, PJR, obviously our clients are coming to us with a variety of needs, and each client is going to approach this transition in their own way, and that means that the timing it has to be flexible. So we do offer a transition pretty much as part of any kind of audit within your cycle. Now, the obvious ideal approach would be to transition as part of your recertification audit. The recertification audit already includes additional audit time. It's a longer audit. It includes a new certificate, obviously. This is the preferred approach. However, we absolutely will accommodate you if what you want is to transition as part of a surveillance audit, or if that is what you are faced with. If you have already, say this year, recertified to 9001-2008, you won't be coming up for renewal until the expiry of 9001-2008 has passed. You have to then transition as part of a surveillance audit. And we're prepared to do it as part of an annual surveillance audit, a single semi-annual surveillance audit. We will even accommodate 2 consecutive semi-annual surveillance audits. In these cases, there's a little bit of time that's going to be added for most clients. There's going to be some case-by-case variation. Our preferred approach is to handle the transition in a single step. But again, if you're on semi-annuals, we will accommodate you. Now, in these instances, you would get a revised certificate, a revision to your existing 9001-2008 certificate. Here's how that would work. Let's say that you received an ISO 9001-2008 certificate in January of this year, following either a recertification or a Stage 2 audit. The cert number would be, in this case, C2016-12345, issued January 15th, 2016, and expiring on September 14th, 2018. Now, obviously, this is not a full 3-year period. That's due to the mandatory cutoff established by the ISO for any ISO 9001-2008 certifications. Now, let's say that you complete your transition to 9001-2015 in early 2018. You would then get a revised certificate. You'll note the certificate number is the same, but it has a -R1 now. That's for revision 1. And you'll also note, obviously, the expiry date is now a full 3 years out from the date that it was issued. Now, as to the projected amount of additional audit time that's going to be necessary, we do have an internal grid that we're using to calculate additional audit time. The full measure of that grid is considered confidential, but we can confirm a few things. First, most of our clients, most of the average size clients, are going to require an additional half day. There are going to be some companies out there that are able to transition with no added audit time at all. And where that's the case, we would obviously be totally fine with that. We just have to know what your circumstances are and plan for them accordingly. So we can absolutely provide further information for you through your PJR scheduler or sales representative if needed. Now, as to the anticipated additional audit content, we've prepared a fairly extensive report, and we are going to go through that now. Now, we've organized this report by clause number, and we've tried to provide kind of a two-part analysis here. Number one, we have tried to provide the verbiage from the standard, the relevant clause number, and then how will this be reviewed. Now, the early sections of the 2015 standard, the early auditable sections, 4.1 and 4.2 in particular, there's some very interesting verbiage that's been presented here. And it's talking about some very high-level stuff. So let's go over this. Has the organization implemented a process to determine, monitor, and review external and internal issues relevant to purpose and strategic direction? Now, let's begin with strategic direction. That's a very important term. We're actually going to put that term aside for just a second. I've got a special explanation on that coming up. From this clause, I want to highlight the phrase external and internal issues. And again, just recognizing that this is a big part of how ISO 9001:2015 is taking a step forward. It's using some very common verbiage and trying to really put the point across in a specific way. This whole idea of issues, and issues that come both from outside of the organization and from inside the organization. Now, as to how this is going to be audited, we have developed a report, a portion of the audit report, where we are directing our auditors to interview the leadership team on this and to gather some facts on how does leadership make itself aware of external and internal issues. So we feel that this represents a very open-minded approach, and it also directs and drives a particular kind of dialogue between the auditor and the auditee on this topic. And 4.1 is tied very much to 4.2. And in 4.2 it talks about, has the organization determined who the interested parties are? And we're actually going to jump ahead one slide. And furthermore, has the organization established a process to monitor and review information about the interested parties and what their requirements are? Let's talk about interested parties and what that term is all about. This is actually something that we've talked about in past webinars, but the key thing with interested parties is these are persons that have an impact on your quality system. So In the past, there was a lot of emphasis on customers, and customers are absolutely still a very important part of the puzzle in terms of who influences what we do as an organization. But the term interested parties is intended to kind of broaden the scope of who those folks might be. And from an auditing perspective, we're expecting a few things. Number one, we're expecting that you as organizations have a handle on what this term means and who your relevant interested parties are. Now, again, logistically, what we've done is we've directed our auditors to ask and to see what kind of response we get. Now, we're actually going to see things related to interested parties and also external and internal issues a little bit later when we start digging into new requirements for the management review. Now, additionally, from Section 4, we have some revised requirements that pertain to the scope statement. Those are as follows. In the past, we always looked at the scope statement. We always said, okay, is the scope statement accurate? Well, in the new standard now, it takes it a step further and it says, well, okay, is the scope statement right? And does it build on external and internal issues? Is it relevant to interested party requirements? Does it reflect the products and services of the organization? So scope statement has always been about defining what you are as an organization and what it is that you are certifying. So now with this new kind of presentation of requirements, we say, okay, this is what you've defined. Is this correct? Is this rooted in relevant interested party requirements and so forth? So logistically, we've added a question to the audit report for this. Can the auditor assess the adequacy of the scope statement and confirm that it is indeed accurate and appropriate? Now, also in 4.3, we have the idea of exemptions. You may know, and we've talked about this in other webinars, that the term permissible exclusions has actually been removed from the standard. And it's been replaced with this kind of general idea of non-applicable clauses. And non-applicable clauses is an interesting item, and part of what has come out of this is that now, theoretically at least, you can claim exemption from any part of the standard. Now, of course, we have examined this, and really the only sections that are going to kind of make the grade, so to speak, as being likely acceptable exemptions are going to be sections 7 and 8. Now, as to how we're going to audit these, again, very similar to how we approach permissible exclusions. It's being handled within the audit report, but we have told our auditors that we have to have a bit of an open mind about how the organization might choose to document what these things are. Turning our attention then to Section 5, let's have a look at 5.1.1. There's a couple of really quite critical ideas that are raised in 5.1.1, beginning and probably most prominently in subclause A. Has management demonstrated that it has taken accountability of the effectiveness of the quality management system? And I really like to emphasize this whole idea of accountability. This is a huge step forward for the standard. And this is going to come up again a little bit later when we talk about the former management representative, which has been eliminated. The intent of this clause is, there's a couple layers here. Number one, can we confirm that management is involved in the quality management system? Can we confirm that management is not just a passive participant, but an active participant. And so where are some of the things that we might look for this? Management review, corrective action, customer complaint resolution, and so forth. We would look to see that leadership is weighing in these areas, is aware of what's going on, is hands-on, so to speak, in the dealings of the quality management system. Also in 511, we have a statement that has management assured that the quality policy and objectives are compatible with the strategic direction of the company. Now, I promised you a more broad description of what they mean by strategic direction, and here is where we are going to provide that. Strategic direction is a term that's raised a handful of times in the standard. We're going to see it a few more times. And interestingly, it is not a term that at present has an official definition. It's not been officially defined within ISO 9001 or ISO 9000. So what we have is kind of a consensus on what the intent of that term is. And as of right now, the general consensus is that strategic direction relates to the organization's vision of where they want to be in the future. You might also hear mission as part of this, long-term vision, things of this nature. And the intent is that your quality system and the goals that make up that quality system, there should be some long-range purpose to those goals. You don't have the goals just for the sake of having goals. There's a longer vision to what you're doing. You know, where do you see yourself in a year, in 5 years, in 10 years? What is the trajectory of the organization? Now, in terms of how we're going to assess this, we're going to be looking at management review, obviously. We'll be looking at analysis of metrics. We'll be discussing with leadership, possibly looking at things like business plan minutes and operational memos, and so forth. But I think early on, what we want to promote is that we're all on the same page with what this term strategic direction is all about. 511C talks about, have quality management system requirements been integrated into business practices or business processes. And when the standard was first published, this was kind of a controversial clause, and there was a little bit of consternation as to what are they going for with this particular requirement. So, because in the past, accounting and things of this nature were always considered hands-off. So I want to give you a couple assurances. Number one, accounting is absolutely still hands-off. It's not something that we're going to be digging into your ledgers and so forth. So what might this requirement mean? Well, a few things that we've projected. You know, the standard mandates that you have revision control on your documents, that you know what the current revisions are. The standard mandates that you have traceability within your records. The standard mandates that you have qualified and competent persons fulfilling the functions of the quality management system. These are all things that can be, these are all good practices that can be effectively used in the, quote, business processes, end quote. And so these are the likely manifestations of this clause and this requirement. Looking then at clause 5.2, we have an interesting change. Has the organization ensured that the quality policy is available to all relevant interested parties? And you know, in the past, when we would look at quality policy, and it was always through the lens of, well, are the employees familiar with it? And certainly, employees is that group is still absolutely the primary focus of who the quality policy would be shared with. But the framers of the standard, I think, feel that because the quality policy is viewed as such an important manifestation of strategic direction, like we were talking about, and what the quality management system is pointed towards and so forth, we would look to see that the quality policy is made available to all of those interested parties that are providing input to that quality management system. So now how might this manifest? Well, we might see it posted in your front entryway. We might look to see that it's been listed on your website. Surely there's other ways that you can make the quality policy known and make it generally, as the word is, available to the relevant interested parties. Has top management taken on the responsibility for managing the quality system? This was formerly the purview of the management representative. Now, I already kind of tipped my hand with this when I talked about under 511A, the whole aspect of leadership being accountable. This, I think, seeks to further drive the point home. There were a few types of scenarios that we would run into with a management representative. There were management representatives out there that were part of a team. They were coordinators. They had the full support of the leadership, the full cooperation of the leadership, and they got things done. Then we had situations where there was a management representative that was shouldering the entire load and essentially running the quality system on their own, and with leadership only vaguely involved in any way. Obviously, when the management representative requirement was drafted years ago, the intent was for the former and not the latter to be the case. So I think the framers of the standard, they recognize that, you know what, there's been too many times where a management representative is not a coordinator. They are a person that is dumped on, and this person is doing everything by themselves to run this quality system. Now, in taking away the term management representative, they've eliminated the term, but they have not discarded the idea that a management representative type person can exist. Indeed, they've even gone so far as to say that you can still have somebody that is officially titled management representative. But the emphasis, the onus here is, again, is leadership involved? Does leadership actively participate in the system, and are they leading? That's really the emphasis here. Has top management established a means to monitor if processes are delivering intended outputs? Not really a huge change. I've included it only because it is some new verbiage. As to how this will be audited, we've already, for years, we've made it our practice to review key performance indicators, KPIs, or objectives. That will continue to be the case. And we will absolutely continue to look to see that management is involved in the monitoring of KPIs and within the corrective action process as well. Turning our attention then to Section 6. Section 6, of course, is the primary section as it pertains to risk, risk-based thinking, as the standard refers to it. And the controls associated with risk, I think we could conclude that we're still in the early phases of getting a feel for the right ways to go about this. But there's a few things that we can take from both how the section itself has been written, and in particular the writings within Annex A that pertain to risk. And first of all, those things tell us that a formal process for risk is not going to be required. That's huge. The intent, of course, is that risk and risk-based thinking are an integrated part of your existing processes. Now, we've instructed our auditors, and in fact, we've added a question about this to our audit report. We've instructed our auditors to simply ask the question, what are you doing to incorporate risk-based thinking into your quality system? And then to be prepared to review whatever it is you happen to share with us. And there's a lot of approaches that can be brought to bear for this. We've talked in other webinars about management review. We've talked about preventive action. We've talked about contractual oversight and so forth. The onus really is on the organization to understand the requirement and be prepared to explain what their approach is. 6.1.2, kind of the continuation of this clause, has a process been developed to address the identified risks, including evaluation of effectiveness? And again, what would we look to see in practice? And we've got this very open-ended question within the audit report. Going ahead now to section 6.2. Are quality objectives relevant to conformity of products, and do they enhance customer satisfaction? And in this instance, I think this is very, very close to what we had previously with quality objectives, but again, it's driving home a key point, a key idea. And that idea is that quality objectives should be as relevant to core purpose, and there's that word again, strategic direction, as possible. Now, in my analysis of this clause, one of the things that I was asked along the way, well, what if we have safety objectives? What if we have financial objectives? And I would say that if you have a sufficiently diverse listing of objectives, that you are covering those areas, first of all, that's absolutely fine. You are permitted to do so, so long as this requirement is still upheld. Now, additionally, in terms of how we're going to audit this, we have already an existing part of our audit report. We've merely tweaked it a bit to inquire as to whether or not this is being upheld. 6.2.2 tells us that quality objectives have to be analyzed to assign resources, to identify responsible parties, to establish a timeline, and to determine evaluation practices. Again, our audit methods for this are unchanged. The scope of what we're looking for is a bit expanded from what it was before. But frankly, most companies are already doing this. This is the right way, obviously, to approach quality objectives. Jumping ahead then to section 7, we have a couple of key ideas, beginning with organizational knowledge, and then this is actually spread over 2 slides here, what we'll be looking at. Has a process been established to ensure that organizational knowledge is maintained and made available? Now, this idea of organizational knowledge, the best way to understand this is to think in terms of, in your organizations, do you have persons that are qualified and capable of doing certain tasks, whether that be manufacturing or administrative? And if that person was someday no longer able to do that task, would that be a severe blow to the organization and to your ability to have an effective quality system. So I had a person at a recent presentation say, "You're talking about cross-training." And I suppose in a way I am. That's one approach that you can certainly take for this. But there are others. And the idea is that we have a way to retain this, as they call it, organizational knowledge, and not be dependent on the expertise of one key person. So we would look to things like training methods, work instructions, enhanced quality controls. Now additionally, part of what we're looking for here is, do you learn from past mistakes? If you have a quality issue, a return from a customer that points to one particular direction or another, do you then respond to that? Do you improve your processes? Do you add to your font of organizational knowledge and improve what you do as a result? Now, additionally, with organizational knowledge, and again, this is 716, do you have a process in place to evaluate existing competencies against changing needs and changing trends? And can you be forward-looking in terms of where are we going? Are we going to be ready for the challenges ahead? That's another huge part of, again, it's risk-based thinking. Can we be ready for what's coming? And so they've included some verbiage for that. Now, as far as how would we audit organizational knowledge, let's look at this now. There's a couple of things. Number one, this is going to be very much a results-rooted item, right? We'll be looking at customer complaints. We'll be looking at performance in your metrics. We'll be looking at product returns. We'll be looking at your internal efficiencies and looking to see, okay, how is this organization managing its organizational knowledge? Is it managing its organizational knowledge at all? Is this effective? So that would be the projected approach. We turn our attention then to Section 8, and we do have a few additional items in Section 8 as well. These first two are both related to product design. I'm actually going to go through these fairly quickly. If you design your products, do your design inputs include standards and or codes of practice that you've committed to implement? And do your inputs include consideration of potential consequences of failure due to the nature of products or services? Now, I think for most organizations that design products, these are things that were already being considered. As to whether or not it was captured and on the record, perhaps that's another matter. What is perhaps more interesting to consider with this is what is it that you're actually designing? There's a lot of companies out there that design a product, and it's absolutely their design, but it's part of a larger item. If you are designing, for example, a small widget that becomes part of a 500-piece assembly, how much can you really know about potential consequences of failure? How much can you really know about standards and codes of practice? So we are going to approach this requirement with a grain of salt, and certainly we have taken steps to train our auditors to be obviously aware of this requirement, but also prepared to assess this requirement properly. Has the organization established a method to communicate their intent in control and monitoring of external provider performance to external providers? Kind of an interesting twist here. In the past versions of the standard, you've been required for some time to have methodology in place for not just evaluating, but for reevaluating suppliers, and to have steps in place to kind of know how your supply base is doing. Now they are saying you need to let the external providers know what your methodology is going to be, how you're going to approach this. So there's a number of ways that we communicate with our suppliers. We have purchase orders, we have contracts, we have terms and conditions, supplier manuals, and so forth. Our existing methods will absolutely be brought to bear in assessing this, but there is now this added layer of expectation. Have controls been established for external provider property where ownership does not transfer to the organization? Interesting requirement here, and I'm going to preface my comments on this by kind of highlighting how this requirement has been present for some time in the ISO 9001 standard under customer property. We've had this requirement for many years where if you have property that belongs to your customer, that you would retain that property, have an accounting of who it belongs to, and then report to the customer if such property is lost or damaged. And the common examples were things like raw materials and testing stands and things of this nature. So now the standard is saying, okay, that stays, but in addition to that, we're going to place a similar requirement for external provider property. So a good example of this might be if you have a need to set up a powder coating booth. And obviously there's some expense to that. So you enter into a lease arrangement with a powder coat expert. They set up a booth in your facility complete with vents and all of the things that you need to do an effective job with powder coating. That powder coat booth and just about everything in it doesn't belong to you yet. It's on a lease. It still belongs to the external provider. So if that happens, if it's damaged or lost or what have you, you would have to have a means to record that and report it. And we would look for things like purchase orders, contracts, open lines of communication with the external provider. Have controls been established for the applicable post-delivery activities? Now, post-delivery activities, for the most part, are going to consist of those situations where there is, for example, an aftermarket application. Some of the examples that the standard gives are things like warranty or recycling or things of this nature. I would say that for most organizations, there's going to be limited applicability of this clause. For some organizations, there'll be no applicability of this clause. But we do recognize it as a new requirement, and we're certainly going to be following up on it. 856 talks about changes, and there's actually 2 slides for this. Has a process been determined for responding to unplanned change in such a way that conformity with requirements is maintained? So you think about unplanned changes. What might that be? Well, we look at, for example, corrective actions. We look at customer complaints. We look at these things in terms of something that came down our way and we had to respond to. And as a result, the system was changed. So 856 is saying, do you have a process in place to respond to something that is unexpected? And then furthermore, do you have a way to retain documented information or keep records about those changes and to discuss who authorized the change and what were the actions that came from the change? So Again, we would look to perhaps corrective action, perhaps customer complaint resolution, perhaps management review, other areas. But again, this is a new requirement. I mentioned management review had some expanded requirements within it. We're going to go through those now, kind of rapid fire. There are, in fact, three particular items that are new and are going to be required discussion within the management review meeting. And those are discussion of internal and external issue changes, including the effect on the strategic direction of the company, a discussion of external provider or supplier performance, and an assessment of risk management actions. So we've got three items here that are new input for the management review requirement. Now our approach to auditing management review will absolutely be the same as it ever was. We have a question within our audit report, but again, we've trained our auditors to be aware that there is some new content required here. And our expectation is that, again, if you have a standardized agenda or what have you, that these topics will be accounted for. Now, as to the methodology that you use for management review, well, there's a number of ways that you can do this, and they'll all continue to be acceptable. If you want to have a management review meeting once a year and cover everything at once, that is still going to be an acceptable method as long as it's working effectively. If you are the type of organization that takes the management review process in smaller bites and you have kind of a month-by-month discussion of a couple things at a time, that's fine too, as long as the content is being discussed. Okay, that does it for new content, and I do hope that that analysis was helpful. Let's continue now with some general comments on how the audit to 9001:2015 is going to feel different from 9001:2008. So we feel that for most of our clients, the difference is it's going to be minimal and it's going to be manageable. And you can kind of summarize the audit, the difference of the audit in three general areas: expanded role of leadership, risk-based thinking requirements, and elimination of previously required documentation. Let's start with discussion with leadership. Now, we've gone over this now with the new clauses. I'm sure that you have noticed there's a fairly extensive list of things that leadership is expected to be involved in. So we've made note of that, and we have expanded those portions of the audit that deal with leadership. We've actually got a special section in the audit report specifically for interviewing leadership. We've even told our auditors it would likely be a good idea to have a section in the audit plan even where this is called out, and possibly even consider doing it right after the opening meeting. Just start right in with leadership and get some of these fundamental questions answered. Risk management or risk-based thinking. I've emphasized now several times that a formal process is not required, and so the approach is simply to have a dialogue. The auditor will ask, what are the strategies that you've put in place to incorporate risk-based thinking into what you do, or some variant on that question. And I have instructed our audit staff to be open-minded and to listen to you and to allow you to kind of make your case as to why your approach is an effective approach. And no more preconceived expectations for documentation. This has been covered extensively in other webinars, but as I'm sure you're all well aware, there are no requirements for any procedures in 9001-2015, no longer a requirement for a quality manual. Now, from an auditing standpoint, this means a couple of things. It means, first of all, that auditors cannot demand that you produce a procedure for any particular activity. They can't look to you and say, well, okay, where's your procedure for corrective action? Where's your procedure for document review? Those procedures may have been mandatory in the past. They are no longer mandatory under this new standard. However, I do want to emphasize that if you choose to have a procedure for one topic or another, and many companies have indicated they're planning to keep their procedures. They feel that they are a value-added part of their quality system. So if you do choose to keep one or more of your procedures, recognize that the content of that procedure is still relevant as audit criteria, meaning that you will be held accountable to whatever that procedure says it is you do. So if you choose to have a procedure for management review and it says that you will have a management review every 6 weeks and you don't, you could potentially be issued a nonconformance during the audit process. That's what it means to be admissible as audit criteria. Now, there are a couple of additional things that we will be looking at that are rooted not in ISO 9001-2015, but in ISO 17021-2015. ISO 17021, you may or may not know, is a standard that controls what certification bodies do. PJR is accredited to this standard through the accreditation bodies. So, for example, ANAP here in the United States. We have to abide by a number of things, and 17021 is one such item. And 17021 has raised a couple of items that we have to follow up on in our audit process. The first of these is statutory and regulatory requirements. And we've actually added a special section to our audit report for this purpose. Now, I do want to clarify that with statutory and regulatory requirements, the way that the requirement has been worded, it's as follows. Number one, do you have a process in place for identifying applicable statutory and regulatory requirements? And number two, are your processes effective for implementing those statutory and regulatory requirements? So that's really the primary emphasis of what we're looking at with statutory and regulatory. Now, additionally, we are telling our auditors that they need to provide comment on the overall adherence that the organization shows to the spirit of the IAF expected outcomes. Let's talk about that for a second. The IAF expected outcomes, it's a publication of the IAF, the International Accreditation Forum, and who they are, just to mention. You can think of the IAF as kind of the top dog, so to speak, in terms of enforcement of the standards. ISO writes the standards, and then IAF and the accreditation bodies that make it up, they kind of enforce the standards. They wrote a position paper, I guess you could say, in 2012 that they called the expected outcomes. And they said, these are the key ideas of what a quality system should mean for the organization that implements it. What does it mean to implement such an item? I've provided the URL here if you want to take a look at the items yourself. We do have a summary on the next slide. And here it is. We have 9 key ideas that are raised by the IAF expected outcomes. First of all, is your quality system suitable for the processes and products that you have? Do you have an analysis and understanding of your customers' needs? Have you been specific enough in laying out product characteristics so that you're meeting applicable requirements? Do you manage your processes in such a way that you achieve your expected outcomes? Have you done what is necessary to allocate resources? Have you established a process for monitoring and control of product characteristics? Do you have steps in place to prevent nonconformance and to take action when nonconformance occurs? Do you have effective things in place for internal auditing and management review? And overall, are you monitoring, measuring, and seeking to have continual improvement in your quality system? Now, these are all things that are part and parcel of the 9001:2015 standard itself. So if you're upholding the 9001:2015 standard, you will be upholding the IAF expected outcomes by default. But as auditors now, we are tasked with considering these ideas as part of our audit report. Now, as to how the audit will be the same, the key aspect of these audits is very much what it was under 9001:2008, and that is that we audit your processes. These are your processes. You define what they are. We audit you as you say you are. Element-based audits have been obsolete for a long time, and so we definitely want to take a process approach in doing these audits. And that means that the methods of auditing are going to be the same. We're still going to be observing what you do. We're still going to be interviewing people. We're still going to be reviewing your documented information. We still need to learn what your process is. We still need to review evidence of the process. And we still expect you to demonstrate that the requirements of the standard have been addressed through the processes that have been established. In conclusion, PJR is absolutely ready to help your transition into 9001:2015. We are confident that for the majority of our clients, this will be a very seamless transition and that you will enjoy a whole host of benefits in transitioning to the new standard. I do invite you to tune in for one of our other webinars. ISO 9001:2015, Preparing for a Successful Transition, is also delivered on a frequent basis. It is an overview of the development of the standard, an update on the transition timeline. We kind of go through the format and layout, and we've got some answers to common questions. Also, the interaction of processes and its importance to a successful audit. This is another frequent webinar. We cover how to properly define your processes, how to understand what they are, and how to approach that in an effective manner. I've got a new webinar under development right now called What to Expect During Your Stage 1 Audit. That one will be premiering soon. We do like to keep in touch with every one of our clients and prospective clients, and one of the best ways for us to do that is if you opt in. If you visit our website at www.pjr.com, if you go to the bottom of the home page, give us your email address and click subscribe, you'll be automatically kept informed of the latest news. I do want to thank you for your time. Please note that copies of our presentation will be available for download shortly. You'll be able to get your hands on the slides. Also, this webinar and all other past PJR webinars are going to be available for reviewing on our website anytime under the heading Previously Recorded Webinars. At this time, I'm going to unlock the questions panel and see if we have any questions. Okay, we're getting some questions about the availability of the webinar. Again, give us just a little bit of time. We'll absolutely have this available for download and for reviewing. Any other questions today? Okay, well, I do thank you all for your time. Have a great day.